Hi kids, screencast number 2. We're going to start with Bacon's Rebellion. So here's what I would do is I would pause and if you're on a computer or a tablet, I would pull up the notes online too so you can follow along. The first thing we're going to talk about is Bacon's Rebellion. It's the name of a farmer in Virginia, and he was mad about the following. He was mad that there was an increase in the number of indentured servants, which we talked about the other day in class, and they didn't have any land to farm, and they didn't have any jobs to work, which was a problem. So what they did was they stormed the Capitol to protest the fact that the government would not help them claim some lands that the Native Americans were on. And it lasted for a couple months, and what it ended as is a bunch of these indentured servants turned farmers started taking land from the natives. And the reason that you would call it a successful rebellion is because King Charles, who was in charge of England for the first time ever, had to acknowledge the fact that the population in the colonies was increasing and that farmers were going to need more representation, or there were going to be more rebellious acts like this. So it got the ball rolling. If you're going to write something down, I would put an arrow next to the last bullet point and say this got the ball rolling in regards to representation for the colonists. The next thing that we're going to talk about on the slide is next thing up for us is slavery here. The slavery, we talked about this the other day in class, the slave trade changed because slaves were cheaper. They had a reputation for working harder, and they lasted longer because they had to work forever. What this did, or the reason that it evolved from this is, like we mentioned the other day, the indentured servants ran out and were kind of causing a bunch of trouble when they became free men, and the farmers just didn't want to deal with it anymore. And so this led to the concept of the Middle Passage, which was that trip that they took from Africa to the West Indies to the colonies, and this is what started this triangular trade. And I think what happened is that a lot of the farmers rationalized by saying that it wasn't as bad as it looked to have the slaves because they were giving up money and raw materials in return for the slaves. This is an important slide here. The tax called the Navigation Acts. You need to understand the 4 bullet points that are clearly listed right here. The Navigation Acts required that all goods shipped out of the United States or the colonies, excuse me, in the North or the South needed to be shipped in a colonial or English ship. You couldn't have a ship from Spain or from France. It had to be from England or the colonies. The next thing is that there had to be at least 75% of the ships had to be employed by and ran by colonists. They didn't want slaves to be working on the ships for people to save money. They didn't want immigrants to be working from Spain or France. They wanted, or Africa, they wanted colonists to be working on it to help provide them with jobs. You could only export certain products, and I would put something next to this on your notes saying certain products means tobacco and then later cotton. They didn't care about anything else, but England put a restriction on tobacco and cotton saying it could only be sent from the colonies to England. And then they took excess supply and sold it to the other countries for a profit. And then all goods had to be traded through an English port. And what you'd want to put next to this is they had that rule because they wanted to be able to, this one here, they wanted to be able to check the ships. So they would have British military or British officials checking the ships to make sure that they didn't have more tobacco or more cotton on it than they had originally signed up for. Now, this was sort of like I guess kind of the tardy policy here at Woodbury High. We have a rule, but sometimes we don't follow it all the time to sort of kind of help keep the peace. The idea of salutary neglect is the concept of not necessarily following all of the rules on purpose to help create a better climate and relationship between the colonists and the country of England. So basically what they did was they didn't always check the ships. They didn't always make sure there were 3/4 colonists. They didn't always make sure that tobacco or cotton weren't going to other places. And what this did was it kept the colonists happy and made them feel like they were free, and England benefited because the colonies were trading a lot, and therefore England got part of that money. So what you have on the slide before is all of the rules and why they had the rules, and this was put in place to help the colonies kind of keep them under wraps. And then on the next slide you had the kind of on purpose not paying attention to all of the rules to help keep people happy. And then the last one is what we talked about today in class, a little review, the comparison of the economies in the North and the South. The southern colonies had a good thing going with tobacco and cotton, and the fact that all of their rivers would line up with the shipping ports in the southern part. However, that also helped the North because the North had the lumber that built the ships that they needed to trade. The biggest difference between the North and the South long term is that the South had plantations with slaves, so they were all spread out and the wealth was held by a minority of the people. And in the North, they were built up in urban cities with access to the raw materials that created businesses and provided jobs for people. So this was more long-lasting and had the wealth spread out. So tomorrow when you get to class, we're going to take a quiz on these 4 slides. It would be a good idea to be writing stuff down as you're going through. See you tomorrow.